Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's insight session on creating friction-free relationships with Elsa Velasco Paul. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded, and within a few days, you will receive an email with instruction. With both the slides and the recording. You can ask any questions using the Q&A box on the screen, and Elsa will answer as many questions as she can during the presentation. My name is Michelle, and I oversee the education and professional certification products and services at the IEEE Computer Society. Our insight session focuses on essential business skills designed to help you excel in your career role and support your career growth. Joining us today is Elsa Velasco Paul, who is a long-standing IEEE Computer Society trainer known for delivering thought-provoking and highly practical sessions on communication, design thinking, and change management for technical audience. Since 2019, she has thousands of IEEE members. IEEE members strengthen the human layer behind engineering challenges. Elsa's expertise lies in bridging complex technical ideas with clear communication, actionable leaderships, and adaptive innovation. Her teaching approach combines evidence-based behavior science with real-world technical example, ensuring every session translates directly into measurable professional growth. That being said, Elsa, thank you for presenting today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome aboard. Like Michelle said, it is always wonderful being here with all of you. And especially today when I'm talking about one of my favorite topics, how to navigate those waters of relationships, particularly when friction and conflict seem to be poking their heads around every corner. Now, before I start, I want to acknowledge the incredible IEEE Computer Society team, and that's Michelle, Scott, Eric, and everybody that I don't know that's behind the scenes that makes these sessions possible. This continues to be one of my favorite places to be right here with you. And like Michelle said, I am the co-founder of the M&E group, but I have the other part of the M&E group. His name is Mike. And Mike is going to be manning the scenes behind the curtain. So if you do have any questions, make sure that you don't wait until the end. Make sure you put them there in the Q&A, because Mike will make sure that we can see them and take care of you right here during this session. Mike, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, just to be clear, this session is meant to support you in your professional and your personal growth. Just to be clear with everybody, this does not replace therapy or any professional services. This is meant for educational and for learning and reflection, which we're going to do a lot of that today. If you feel that you like some of these parts, or you really want to reuse anything that you see in this presentation, give us a call, contact us. We have your information, the information at the end. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, because we love partnering with our friends here from the IEEE Society. Now let's kick it off, and let's start with the story. A while ago, I want to say maybe 2-3 years ago or something like that, I was watching on the National Geographic channel the story about baby birds hatching. It was a pretty short clip, and watching it from here, the instinct for me was so strong. I wanted to just go in there and open that little crack of the shell for that baby chick. The struggle was so intense, but if we did, the chicks that have this quote unquote extra help, they rarely survive. You see, that struggle, that resistance, that them having to continue to pecking in the right direction, that actually strengthens their wings, their beaks, and prepares them for life outside the shell. Why are we talking about this? Because humans, you and I, we are the same way. We learn through friction. So if it's too little a challenge, we stay fragile. If it's too much, then we break. We learn from mistakes, and from these mistakes, we grow. While friction and adversity, we all know that are necessary and they're going to happen regardless, our communication in general, and this is going to be the guiding thread line we're going to have throughout this time together, should be rooted in three things. One, in connection, establishing connection, and that is the guiding point of every time that you have any conversation, any form of communication with anybody. It should be guided by collaboration, the efforts to do something together that is powerful and beneficial. And it needs to be grounded in control. And hear me out. Specifically, controlling what we can. I cannot control your delivery, but I can control my reactions, my tone, and specifically my timing. We're going to talk about timing in a little bit. When we manage our reactions, we end up shaping the emotional atmosphere around us. And that's the foundation for every relationship that we're going to be talking about today. Every relationship is like a river. Like it says there, the person that we're talking to is not just the words, it's happening below those words or below that current. Every relationship has two layers: the words that we surface or the words that we hear, and those emotions that are beneath. What we say, for example, why is this project so delayed? That's what you're hearing. But what we mean, what me as the deliverable, the frustration, the fear, the pride, the excitement, the joy, all of that, that is that undercurrent that unless we pay attention, we will miss it. When we react only to the words, to the why is this project so delayed, and immediately you get defensive, we end up missing the real message. But when we pay attention to what's underneath, to the why is she saying that? What is happening with her that she feels that way? That is when we move from reacting to understanding. And that is exactly where we want to land, because that's where the connection starts. There's pillars for any type of relationship, and this is pretty extensive, but we're going to boil it down to four. When these emotions go undercurrent, sometimes yours and mine, they don't always flow together. Sometimes they collide, sometimes there's friction, and it's not really that bad. Friction in itself, and you probably guys know this much better than anybody else, it's energy. It's what makes progress possible. It's a good thing done well. But without it, what happens is there's no traction, there's no lift, there's no growth. The goal in itself is not to avoid conflict in itself, but to manage it with care. If there's too little friction, things are going to stagnate. There's no learning. But when we have healthy friction, it helps us clarify, one, boundaries, and two, it helps strengthen trust. It really is that pulse of growth that when we do it well, boom, it really makes respect get handled wonderfully. Now, these four pillars that we're talking about, they might seem a little bit familiar because you've probably seen it from previous webinars that you've seen here with us when we talked about trust in relationships. And they're very simple. You've heard this many, many times. It's trust, respect, connection, and mutual benefit. Now, let's see what it means to us. When we talk about trust, trust says, okay, I get it. We might not agree, but I still believe in your intentions, and your intentions are not to harm me. Boom, that's great. Then respect joins in the conversation and says, okay, even when we disagree, that's okay, because your voice, your opinion matters just as much as mine. And I'm not saying that as in a position of I'm giving you the power to have reasoning within your voice. Then connection joins it and says, even better, we're on the same side. We're both human beings looking for a solution to whatever situation we're in. And then mutual benefit, which a lot of people miss it, but it is important and you shouldn't feel bad about it. Mutual benefit says this is not about a quote unquote win-win in the ether out there. Mutual benefit says let's find a way forward that works for both of us and that both of us can identify. When all these four are present, trust, respect, connection, and mutual benefit, friction becomes progress, not just pain. So let's take this into real life examples. This is called active listening. And we had this in one of the previous webinars when we talked about the difference between empathy and sympathy and compassion. And we introduced active listening. Active listening is bringing intention and separating yourself from your persona into the other person's and then combining both of them. So let's take this a step back. When I use I statements, for example, when instead of saying like, you are always late in handling these projects, or you always pick me up 20 minutes after I've asked you to, that's very defensive. That's going to land really soft, really hard. So what if I change it and I say, for example, I feel this project needs to be handled in a better way. You open for the other person to explain, yeah, I agree. Maybe the other person isn't responsible for the project to be late. How about that? We put our assumptions on the side. This softens the edges and owns our own experience because my assumptions are mine and it doesn't mean that they're true. And then choosing curiosity is one of my favorites because when we opt to say, I'm choosing curiosity over judgment, I'm replacing the, why did you pick me up late? How about, help me understand. I thought we agreed on picking me up at 4:20. Well, maybe you thought you said that, but the other person doesn't remember hearing it. Or maybe you didn't say the date, or maybe you didn't say the location. And then practicing clear, direct communication is probably one of the most obvious ones, but this is where most of us fail because what is clear to me might not be clear to the other person. What means direct to me might mean that it's a different way of communicating. I prefer texting, whereas you prefer a phone call. I prefer an email, whereas you prefer a Teams message. Direct, clear communication means respect, plus correct timing, plus clarity. This brings trust, and it makes trust get stronger. And finally, this is one of my favorites. Again, you guys know where I'm coming from. I believe we don't have enough grace, humor, and playfulness in every situation in our life. We need to lighten up, not take things when they're very serious and when they need to be in a jokingly manner. But if we insert a little bit of lightness, it reminds all of us that the relationship matters above everything else. And that's what people really want to be reminded of, that they matter. Now, what nurtures all of these relationships? Well, let's start from the top. Listening. Listening again, and you're hearing this word empathy a lot. Well, empathy in itself is great, but until you bring it into practice and into something positive for all the parts involved, it really just stays there as a mere concept. Listening is empathy in action, and active listening brings that to life. This means pausing and pausing long enough to hear what someone else is really saying, especially, hear me out, especially when emotions run high. Let me give you a tip. When you feel that you're in a position when you're very, very mad at somebody, or you're being affronted by somebody and they're asking you a lot of questions and they feel to be very direct and you feel that it's a little bit of an aggression, make sure that the first thing that comes out of your mouth is not a word. Make sure that the first thing that comes out of your mouth is breath. So let me give you an example. If somebody says like, why were you late? What happened with this? Instead of saying, well, you didn't tell me that. Immediately the tone of that conversation is going downwards. If as soon as you hear that, you say, that's a good question. I thought we had agreed that I was going to pick you up at 4:20 at so and so and so time. This breath allows you to gain control of the situation, gain control of yourself, and get your thoughts together. Now, I'm not saying do the big sigh like, oh. No, that's not a breath, that's a sigh. I'm talking about a breath that allows you to gain some control, put yourself back together, and think before you talk. Very important. And then, obviously, when a person says, this project is a mess, for example, what they really might mean is, I'm overwhelmed. They might not even be thinking about you, that you're making the project a mess. They might be thinking that not only do they have this project, they've had 3 other things happening, plus things happening at home. Allow for some grace, allow for some space for this person to feel vulnerable enough to tell you what's happening. So if we respond instead of, well, I'm the only one handling this project. What if you said, hey, you sound stressed. How can I help? Let's work through this. That is going to change everything. I promise you. And then empathy. Empathy really creates psychological safety. And what's even better is that it turns tension into really good collaboration. Now, one of my favorite things is when we have two mutual forces, when we have mutual support and thoughtful negotiation. This is what human relationships thrive on. It's two powerful forces, and sometimes we apply one, forgetting that thoughtful negotiation is an essential point. And many of us, well, don't think we're skilled negotiators, but hey, I have some news for you. Negotiation is a skill that can be learned. And we actually have a lot of webinars. I think you can find them in probably year 2 or year 3 here, right here in your library. Mutual support starts with, I show up before you're asked. I don't have to wait for something to explode or to go wrong for me to show my support. You show up before. And even during the hard times, I'm there. I'm in the present, in the difficult moments. I celebrate when things are going well. I offer help. And I am consistent and I'm reliable. Then thoughtful negotiation as part of the combination, as part of this equation, says and talks, okay, let's look for real win-win solutions. What matters to you? And for me to be able to do that, I need to step away from my assumption, from my needs, and from what I am seeking for, and understand, what are you coming from? What's important to you? And then how can we get there together? Understanding what matters to the other person and trading value, not demands, not what you need and what I need, but what is the undercurrent, what is the value. When both of these are present, oh, it is beautiful, absolutely beautiful, because that's when relationships move from just a transaction to an exchange of information that happens in the office, in our home, with our brothers and sisters, with our parents, into a partnership. And that is beautiful. Absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Now let's talk to the sticking point of today. What are those things that create friction? What happens? Well, let's start by recognizing what are those patterns, the things that damage the connection, the things that makes things not go as smooth as you want to. What happens when this balance disappears? We're in a relationship, we're in a conversation at work, and all of a sudden you feel things spiraling downwards. Or even worse, you step into a meeting and you feel the air is tense. And something happened, you walked into it, but all of a sudden you've been giving a ticket into this ride and you cannot bug out. You are part of it now. Again, good friction is positive, it helps us grow. But friction turns toxic, and that happens more frequently than not. When this connection that we talked about, when me being willing to step outside of my own needs, my own skin, into other people's, when it gets replaced by competition. And I'm going to be clear here, and this is a disclaimer. I am a very competitive person. I love competition. I love to see who wins in anything. But when I replace competition in lieu of partnering with the other person and the needs and the good heart of the other person, that is wrong. When being right, no matter what happens, matters more than being effective, that's when this is a situation of toxic friction, toxic competition. Winning an argument is sometimes a loss. And I'm talking here from my perspective as an attorney. We have to say the best trial is the one that never makes it to trial. That's the best case. Winning an argument often means losing something bigger and much more valuable than you can even imagine. Because sometimes when you win an argument over anything else, you lost trust, you lost people's respect. Even more importantly, you lost the connection. And that's not worth it. Winning wasn't worth that. The goal is not to, quote unquote, win this conversation. The goal is to create safety so that the subsequent conversations that happen are wonderful. And that builds every single time that you interact with each other. So these common patterns that we have. Number one, the problem. When winning is an argument, it is a losing game. So the solution, it's pretty simple. You want to focus on creating a safety net for the next conversation, but not proving a point in this one. Being right, just right for the sake of being right, damages these emotional bonds. And sometimes this striving to win, it creates adversaries that you didn't have or that you didn't need. Like we say, victory in debate, sometimes when done wrong, it's a loss in relationship. So overall, it's a loss, period. Now, these common friction patterns that we've been hearing about, we can boil them down to four, and there's many more, but these are the essential ones. It starts again with us, and it starts with when I misread or when I assume what is happening with the other person. We talked about control, and in control, we say, I control myself, I control how I respond, and I control how I can react to a message so that this influences the conversation and the other entity that is corresponding with me. When I take things personally, for example, when it's just poor communication, when the person with the project said, this project is a mess, and I immediately assume that they are blaming me for the project. Maybe this person doesn't know I'm in the project, or maybe this person is just commenting in general that she or he is part of the project and is responsible for it. Maybe they're just looking for somebody to tell them, yeah, I know, but how can we figure this out together? Or maybe they're looking for somebody to say, well, it may seem like that, but I think it's going okay. You don't know where others are coming from. So allow some space, allow some grace, and do not assume that what you're reading is what is happening. And if we pair that with the blaming language, or what we call the absolutes, you always, you never, I've never done this. Whenever you use any of those words, always or never, that is a bad sign. So if I were you, I would take that out of my conversation. Always, you never, or this never happens, or we're never going to. Immediately, people feel defensive. So change it, switch your blaming language to something that, again, focuses more on moving forward than staying in the position, in the situation that you are. Again, with the misreading behaviors, it comes because we think that what I am reading, I am right. And that's called mind reading. We're assuming that my thinking is the right thinking. And I forget about asking, what would happen? Think about this. What would happen if the next time that you feel personally attacked because of something that somebody said, what would happen if you asked the person and said, hey, I sense that things are going a little bit chaotic here. How can I help? Or is this something that I could have changed? When you allow for that space for the other person to even identify that their language was maybe a little bit more caustic than they wanted to, you will see it, that they immediately will say, no, that's not what I meant. It's just, I'm overwhelmed. And you're allowing that person to feel confident enough and to feel comfortable with you to explain that where they're coming from. And I think this is my least favorite of all. I have no idea who thinks that this works. Power plays. Power plays only works in 1980s movies and Wall Street type movies. It doesn't work anymore. It's caustic, it's dangerous, and it is the sure way for you to lose partnerships, even if it's just for show. Using pressure tactics or using manipulation, gaslighting people just for the purpose of you winning a conversation does not work. It doesn't. Each of these each of these friction patterns, what they end up doing is they block connection, because what they are replacing is they're replacing what we talked about early on in this session. They're replacing curiosity, my willingness to explore what's happening, what's going, where are we heading to, with certainty. And what is even sadder is that this certainty is not right. It's a certainty that only exists in your head. That's a waste of time. Now let's talk about some of these real world examples. You've seen all of these patterns, I know this, in your meetings, in families, even with the people that you find when you're commuting to work or when you're exchanging, money to buy something. Someone speaks in a tone with urgency, and immediately the other person interprets it as aggression. What if the other person is just in a rush? What if the other person just came out of a caustic conversation with their significant other? What if this person is really concerned because something is difficult is happening with their life? It's not about us. People have other things happening besides that conversation that they're happening with us. So missed email then becomes you didn't want to include me in this conversation. Or missed conversation means you're having backdoor conversations without me. What we're reading in all of these cases is we're reading the tone and not the intent. And this has real life consequences, big consequences. For those of you that know who the top picture is, this is the Beatles back when John Lennon introduced Yoko Ono in the conversation. And some people say that she was the cause for this whole group to disband. We're not going to go into that today. But what happened was something that was so powerful because of disagreements and because of the way that they just started to drift apart. It just dissolved, and that was it. And the guy that's down there at the bottom right corner, that's Sam Altman, because some folks say because of the tone and the way that the conversations were going early on in his company, he eventually got even kicked out of his own company. He had to come back in, then he was brought in. But all of these conversations, just the same that happened with Steve Jobs and with many others, they can be prevented as long as you make the decision to step outside of your own comfort zone and your own comfort, quote unquote, safety, which is not safety, and explore and identify where is the other person coming from. The worst of all of these is gaslighting. And gaslighting is when you opt to not be front and center, but manipulate the situation so that it goes in your favor. Newsflash, people sense it. Not only the person that you're interacting with, but those around you. So do not engage into this type of behavior. What really blocks connection? Because ultimately, this is all about connection, right? Well, connection is based on trust, in trust that has logic, authenticity, legitimacy. Authenticity means simply bringing yourself. You don't have to be a better version of anybody else. You're the best version of yourself, and that's what people want to interact with. When we decide to step outside of the true conversation that we need to have, and we step aside from being vulnerable enough to explore where I'm coming from and where are you coming from and what is that middle point, and even more importantly, when you are not willing to be the first one to put the hatchet down, that's when connection is going to be impacted severely. And that is a bigger loss than people understand. There's four, and these four major blockers happen so frequently that I was going to add some examples. And I thought, I know all of my listeners here, they know what I'm talking about. They have hundreds and hundreds of examples. So as I'm reading these, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Give me examples. Tell me if you've ever had any of these ones. So the first one, I know you know what I'm talking about, hidden resentments. So hidden resentment is a conversation that didn't go well, and it could be with a family member. Maybe a conversation that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last week, 20 years ago. It doesn't matter the time becomes blurred. And what is even worse, the reason or what started that conversation, that bad conversation, becomes blurred. But what stayed is the feeling. It's a poison. I call it like a little poison that stays clawed in. And as it stays there, it grows. You need to get it outside of you. These unspoken grudges, they end up eroding and quietly eroding trust. We need to acknowledge these because they are attacking directly connection. And what they do is they prevent authentic interaction. You might be hurt, but feel free and feel confident to talk with the other person and explore what happened. How did we get here? And even more importantly, explore and say, this is how this felt to me. I know you didn't mean it. Be honest and be courageous enough to be the first one to say that. Then lack of emotional safety happens more frequently than not. I know you know what I'm talking about. You walk into a meeting at work, and not all the time do you feel emotionally safe to say what you really think. So you end up not saying anything. Or you know that somebody said something that is damaging or that was, probably not very nice to somebody else, but you don't feel safe enough to say something. When you are in these spaces that there's not enough emotional safety, what gets impacted is trust. And if you can make the change and be willing to speak up about these situations, if it's a group of friends, be the one that says like, hey guys, I know this sounds funny, but it's really not. So let's do something else. Be the one that steps up and changes the tone of these connections. Most of the time, they're habits. People don't know that they're doing it. They're just, that's how they've done their whole lives. Without trust, vulnerability again shuts down. Quick, fast, and most of the time for a very long time. All of this brings communication breakdowns. And remember, communication is not just verbal. Communication can be written. Communication can be even the body language. You walk into a room and somebody immediately crosses their arms and you know they're not cold. Or somebody is looking at their watch every 5 minutes when you're talking to them. All of these communication breakdowns happen for a reason. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe the person really is cold. Or maybe the person has another meeting that you're not aware of, then they need to go. So it's not about you. But ignoring all these nonverbal cues and mismatched communication styles impacts ultimately the flow of communication. All of them impact at the long end. And what they end up doing is they create emotional withdrawal spaces. This is a big word for saying you shut down. You shut down instead of speaking up assertively, freely, and confidently because you just say you get hopeless and you decide it's not worth it. So I'm just not going to say anything. That, in my concept, in my mind, is the saddest situation possible. So I know that all of this seems very dramatic moments, but how it really happens is slowly. It's not a one-time thing. It's a everyday kind of thing. And recognizing them is very powerful because what it does, it helps these small cracks before they become these massive breaks from which we can't recover. Now, as you know, the whole signature, like Michelle said at the beginning of our webinars, is you leave here with something that you can take home or take to work and do something about it. So let's get practical. We're going to talk about some of these tools that you can use every day to keep friction healthy and communication flowing. And I'm going to give you a quick tip. How about you take pen, paper, or on your phone and start typing down all of these and how you would change it. Even more importantly, start thinking of all of these strategies and tactics that we talked about. Which ones do you find apply most to you? Or which one of these situations have you been most in? Have you been most in those emotional withdrawals, or in these cases where you found that there have been a lot of assumptions said about you, or you've done it? Let's talk about those because that way we can help you and make this session as tailored as possible. So let's get right to it. The first one, we said this a couple of times before, the attack. Unless you are in a controlled environment and you're doing this for fun, I cannot think of a time when this actually works. And for those of you, raise your hand if you're there. If you have a significant other, your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, and you get so mad and you just blurt out, "You never listen to me." Oh, there's that never. We talked about it. Those absolutes. They're not such good friends of ours. So let's kick it out. Let's switch it. We're frustrated because we've asked them to bring milk from work and they forget to bring milk, or even worse, when we're packing for work They just throw clothes all over the place and it's a mess and we have to repack the luggage. Oh, that's driving me bananas. Well, let's switch it. Instead of saying, you are driving me bananas, how about I say, I feel unheard when we're packing for work, we're packing for a trip, and clothes is all over the place, and it just makes me really nervous. You're not attacking the other person. You're not reading into their mind, thinking that they're doing this on purpose. You're just telling them, hey, this is where I'm coming from, and this is my thoughts. You're probably thinking, like, who talks like that? I do. And it works. It really works. Be the first one to say how you feel, and you'll be surprised how the other person comes to the table with you and starts to feel open enough to come and solve this. Then the blaming. You attack first, and then immediately you go into blaming mode because why not? If we're already in there, let's make it worse. Guys, no, 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 no. Switch it. Again, own your own situation, own yourself. You cannot speak for the other person. So let's switch it to, hey, I feel frustrated when we change plans and I don't have a bit of time to think this through. I need a little bit of more time to organize my thoughts. Now this person knows where you're coming from, and now they know what they can do about it to help you get to a good place. And even more importantly, to help the situation and to help the relationship. And judging. Guys, unless you are seriously in the world of, of laws, judging doesn't work. It just doesn't. Saying something like, you're so selfish, or you're always late, or you only think about yourself. How do you know that? Are you in that person's head? You're not. You're not. So slow down there, slow down. And let's start with something like, okay, I asked so and so to not throw clothes into the luggage, into the suitcase, and he's still doing it. Well, I think I can say that he doesn't hate my guts. Okay. I think that he's not doing this, and he woke up this morning and saying, I'm going to throw all the clothes in there and hope that she gets really, really, really mad. Yeah, I don't think that he did that. So, as funny as it sounds, that is the type of conversation that is happening in our head when we think that people do this on purpose. So, instead of saying, you're so selfish, how about you say, hey, I need a little bit more time or a little bit more consideration when we make decisions. I need to have equal opportunity to decide on these things. And then the person knows what to do. Next time that something happens, that there needs to be a decision made, they're going to come and say, like, hey, for the next trip, do you want us to book for here or here? There. That's a solution. And you are moving forward. That's all you want. You don't want to stay in this ugly conversation forever. Or do you? So, how do you do that? Well, these are 6 of my favorite tools. I love them because they're easy. You can take them with you and you can practice them every day. Heck, you can practice them today. Actually, today. You can start by today. So let's write these down and let's think which one of these is something that I can test today and start practicing the rest of this week. The first one is unraveling knots. If you've ever done anything that has a lot of strings, for example, with like your earbuds, or you're working with any cabling, and with the knot gets there, the worst thing that you can do is tug at it. That doesn't help. You need to ease so that the knot becomes looser and bigger, and then you can get things through it and make it smoother. Exactly the same thing happens in communication. What you want to do is work through the knot, find that tension, and work through it instead of just cutting it or tugging it. Instead of saying, I give up, this person is impossible. Well, did you do your part? Or did you do as needed, as much as was needed to make this better? Maybe not. So let's try again. And then why? Why is a great word when we use it in the right context. For example, when I'm exploring the why I want to do a project, it helps me ground myself and understand that maybe I'm doing it because I like working with the group of people, but it's not something powerful or a good use of my time. Or why am I afraid to do this? Well, it's because I've never done it before and I'm afraid to fail. But What if the benefits of winning or being successful are bigger than the fail? Those type of whys, powerful. Yes, go for it. Yay. But the whys when you are attacking somebody else, as in, why are you always late? Nope, that is triggering defensiveness. Let's switch that why with the situation. Take it away from the person and put it into the situation. So instead of person, go into what or how. And then timing. We have this running joke here. If we use, whenever there's a great movie that we're watching, and I know that the climax of the event is happening, for example, John Wick is about to go and get the bad guys. And then I turn and talk to Mike and I says, Mike, this is a great time for us to talk about our webinar calendar for 2026. We laugh, but that's what happens in a lot of conversations. Right in the middle of when you're so focused on something, then somebody comes and they want to talk about something that is really, really bad timing. Choose the right moment and then make sure that it's the right moment for those difficult conversations. Constructive power is when we use all these tools of influence to build up rather than tear down. One of my favorite tools is emotional check-ins. And emotional check-ins is you don't wait for the conflict to exist for you to stay tuned in with those that matter to you in your circle. Let's say it's your team. Instead of just waiting for a mess to happen to come and have a meeting, a stand-up meeting, a 15-minute meeting to identify what happened, how about if you have regular check-ins and you just do every so often? Maybe you schedule them, maybe you just do a coffee run and you say, hey, let's go for a coffee and bring back for the team. And in those 5 minutes, that's when you check in and say, hey, I just want to check how are you feeling? How's work going with so-and-so? And allow that person to talk. You'd be surprised how much these emotional check-ins help the relationship. What you're doing is you're checking the temperature, just like you do when you check the oil in your car. You don't wait until the oil is completely deleted to do something about it. You continuously keep an eye on those lights. It's the same with your relationships. And if everything goes sideways, it's really bad, be the first one to do the small gesture to reconnect. You might feel, why do I have to be the one? Well, you want to do that because relationship matters more than just winning, period. And because we're grown-ups, pretty much. So let's leave it at that. Now, these are the questions that I want you guys to really think deeply. Of all the things that we talked about, what are these relationship patterns here that for you personally, you would like to change? Elsa, that's a great question. I think I would like to not being so afraid to speak up when I don't feel comfortable. Or I'm going to stop reading other people's minds. Or I'm going to stop being so competitive that no matter what, I have to win. Which one of these is most important to you? And put them there in the Q&A so we know how we can help you better. Now, of all these communication tools that we talked about, which one resonates the best with you? Which one was surprising? Which one do you think you can apply and it can make a difference for you today? What about empathy? Do you think you can apply empathy and pragmatism, seeing other people's point of view in your daily interaction? Or do you think it's very difficult and you're not there yet? I would love, love, love to hear where you guys are. Great. Now, wow, look at this. We talked about these 4 pillars. We talked about trust, respect, connection, and mutual benefit. And the power of them is, again, without all 4 of them, then we end up missing the bottom line of every interaction that we have. It's about the people, and it's about where they're coming from, not what I'm reading. Now, look at this. Wow, we had a lot of things that we unpacked today, but we can boil it down to probably these 6. Number 1, relationships, people. They need more than just the interaction. They need trust, respect, connection, and that mutual benefit that we talked about. And empathy is super, super powerful, especially when there's action tied to it. Empathy and curiosity, awesome. Because what that does, it really wins into any damages that has happened in in relationships out there. What does not work? It does not, no matter what, blaming, mind reading, assumptions, and all those weird power plays that we talked about that were super successful back in 1980s and 1990s movies. They create friction, so please do not. One of the saddest ones is resentments, because resentments, they are living rent-free in your head, but they're not giving you anything in return. What they're doing is they're creating spaces of unsafety. You don't have safety, emotional safety. And what that ends up doing, it blocks authentic connection. And that's the whole reason why we're here on this beautiful planet. And one of the things we want to watch out for tactically on the practical side is we want to watch out from now on those I statements. Yes, I want to start owning myself and not just blaming it on others. I'm watching also for those negative words, those absolute words. Timing, please don't do it before the Super Bowl or before the game starts. Pick your time right, or before your boss just came out of a very contemptuous meeting. And if something still goes sideways, go in, be the first one and repair those attempts. Go in there and do it effectively with the toolkits that we gave you. Because at the end, balancing empathy, pragmatism, and realism in all of these relationships is powerful, and it really, really works. Now, as we close, I'm going to go back to the egg. Inside, remember the egg, that little chick is pushing and going at it, and he starts pecking. But what's really interesting to see is that they're pecking in the same direction. It gets tired, it rests, and it pushes again. Sometimes chicks fail to do that and they die. They die in their safe space, quote unquote, but they don't become all that they can be. Those that continue to peck in the right direction and keep going at it, resting when they need to, but keep going even when it's dark inside, they are the ones that succeed, and they get out into this beautiful world and become who they want to be. All this friction, all that pressure that they weren't punishment. It was preparation. Isn't that wonderful? If the shell was cracked open for the bird, then the bird would never fly, wouldn't succeed. Its neck would be too soft. So it ends up that effort and not the ease, it's what builds strength. Our conversations work the same way. There's nothing magical about it. It's a little bit of work and a little bit of intention, but a lot of heart. Every disagreement, every uncomfortable truth that comes our way or that we say, they are these shells, and they build that emotional resilience. So too little friction, we stay soft and we get upset by everything that happens. Too much and we shatter and we become hopeless. The key, balance. When we control our reactions, we bring calm where others bring chaos. When the first word out of our mouth is breath, we're able to stay curious instead of combative. And we're building connection instead of competition for the sake of competing. And when we're the ones that repair quickly, boom, we remind people that relationships are worth the effort. All these strategies, they bring control, understanding, and perspective to the moments that really matter. They're not as battles that we have to win and conquer, but they're invitations to improve. Because in the end, my friends, the strongest relationships, just like the strongest wings, necks, and beaks, they are shaped by just the right amount of resistance. And remember, the struggle isn't the problem. The struggle is the strength. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Elsa. I don't see any questions. Do you want to wait about a minute or two?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
And while we wait, Michelle, can I make as usual, some suggestions for reading?
Sure.
Okay, one of my favorites is Conflicted. Give me 1 second. If you have the chance, as usual, I know that this sounds a little bit odd, but please buy used books or share books or whatever you can. but conflicted. This is by Ian Leslie, Leslie. The name is Conflicted: How Productive Disagreements Lead to Better Outcomes. I think it's one of my favorite books because it has a lot of foundational principles, but it has a lot of tacticals. Great book. Another book that just came out this year, 2025, and you can actually look for his podcast, Jefferson Fisher. And the book is The Next Conversation. If you want a lot of just tactical of how to overcome all of these difficult conversations and friction, please pick up those two. On the side of conflicted goes a little bit higher level, and it's fascinating because it goes into disagreements specifically and hones in how can we make it better and what are those specifics that we can do. Jefferson Fisher goes into not only how disagreements happen, but how we can become more assertive in how we stand, in how we communicate. And it's been very refreshing. Something that we've been talking about for decades now. He brought it into life and made it very accessible to everybody. So if you can't pick up the book, go check out his podcast. And no, I am not getting paid by any of them. I just want to share with you guys in the sea of information out there, start with those two. And if you do want to have more ideas on what to read, listen, or connect with, there's my LinkedIn, Elsa Velasco Paul on LinkedIn. I am always excited when I hear from you folks and always willing to help.
Great. Thank you, Elsa. I still don't see any questions. I think we'll wrap it up. I want to say again, thank you, Elsa, for this informative information presentation, and thank you all to our attendees. We do have additional webinars coming up over the next few weeks. On December 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern, it'll be on strategic networking in the quantum ecosystem, and December 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern on presentation skills. We will be sending you a link to these future events along with the slides and the recordings of this Insider session. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.